So picture this. It's January 1969. You're a Honda dealer sitting in a Las Vegas conference room. The company president walks on stage and announces their new superbike for $1,295. The room goes absolutely nuts. People are clapping, cheering, losing their minds. And then he raises the price. Right there, on the spot. $200, just like that. That's the Honda CB750 for you. And that's just fact number 1. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about one of the most important motorcycles ever made, the Honda CB750. Now, you've probably heard the basic story. First mass-produced inline-4 superbike, disc brake, electric start, blah, blah, blah. But there's so much weird stuff about this bike that nobody talks about. We're going deep today. And stick around because some of these facts are genuinely bizarre, like the one about what Honda engineers did in the Nevada desert for 5 days straight, but we'll get to that. Let's get into it. Fact number 1, the instant price hike. Alright, so let's go back to that Las Vegas dealer meeting in January 1969. Honda's president, Kihachiro Kawashima, is on stage. He's about to reveal the CB750 to American dealers for the first time. Remember, nobody outside Honda really knew what was coming. This was the big unveil. He shows them the bike, 4 cylinders, disc brake, electric start. Then he drops the price at $1,295. Now, here's the thing. Competitors were charging over $2,000 for bikes that weren't even close to this good. So when dealers heard $1,295, they absolutely lost it. Standing ovation, people shouting, the works. And Kawashima looks around, sees this reaction, and basically thinks, maybe we priced it too low. So right there in front of everyone, he changes the price to $1,495. Just adds $200. And the dealers are still so hyped that nobody even cares. They're still applauding. Can you imagine any company doing that today? Raising the price mid-presentation because people seem too excited. That's some wild confidence right there. Fact number 2, sandcast isn't actually sandcast. Okay, so if you know anything about early CB750s, you've heard of sandcast engines. These are the holy grail for collectors. People pay stupid money for them, but here's the weird part. They're not actually sandcast. The first 7414 CB750s used what's called casting. It's a different process entirely, but everyone calls them sandcast engines anyway, and the name just stuck. Now, why did Honda use this method for the first bikes? This is the good part. They weren't confident the CB750 would sell. Seriously, they were nervous about it. So instead of investing in expensive die casting tooling, which costs a fortune up front, they went with permanent mold casting because it was cheaper to set up. Think about that. The bike that changed everything. The bike that killed entire product lines at other companies. Honda wasn't even sure people would want it, so they made the first batch the cheap way, just in case. And now those cheap early bikes are worth way more than the later, properly die-cast versions. Life's funny like that. Fact number 3, 6 months from approval to prototype. Here's something that'll blow your mind about how fast Honda moved. The project leader, a guy named Yoshiro Harada, got approval to develop the 4-cylinder engine in February 1968. 6 months later, in August, his team had a working prototype. 6 months. And this wasn't some massive team with unlimited resources. About 20 people total. That's it. 20 engineers designing what would become the most influential motorcycle of its era. For comparison, car companies today spend years developing new engines, with teams of hundreds of people. Honda did it in half a year with a skeleton crew. But here's what makes it even crazier. This wasn't just slapping parts together. They had to figure out the entire architecture, bore and stroke, valve train, oiling system, cooling, all of it, from scratch. And they nailed it the first time. Before we check out the next fact, smash that like button and subscribe. We bring you rare and epic bike stories every week. Fact number 4, the Nevada torture test. So remember that Las Vegas dealer meeting where they unveiled the bike? Well, after all the dealers left, 3 prototype CB750s stayed behind, and Honda engineers proceeded to absolutely torture them. They rode these 3 bikes for 5,000 miles over 5 days. That's 1,000 miles per day in Nevada, in the desert. But they weren't just cruising around, they were deliberately riding them hard, revving the hell out of them, trying to break things. This was their final reliability test before mass production started. Picture these Japanese engineers in the Nevada desert, just thrashing these bikes mile after mile, day after day. That's commitment to quality, and apparently the bikes held up, because shortly after, Honda gave the green light for production. But can you imagine if one of those dealers had stuck around an extra day and saw Honda engineers beating the crap out of the same bikes they just finished praising on stage? That would have been an awkward conversation. Fact number 5, the Honda-matic wasn't automatic. In 1976, Honda released the CB750A. The A stood for automatic. They called it the Honda-matic, except it wasn't automatic. Not really. It had a 2-speed transmission with a torque converter, which sounds fancy, but you still had to manually select gears. There was a foot-operated hydraulic valve that you'd press to shift, so it was like semi-automatic, half-automatic, automatic-ish. The idea was to make the CB750 more accessible to people who were intimidated by a clutch. And to be fair, it kinda worked. You didn't need to work a clutch lever, which some people appreciated, but calling it automatic was generous. It's like calling a washing machine with a manual wringer automatic because you don't have to hand wash everything. The bike sold okay, but it never really took off. Riders who wanted a real automatic transmission felt cheated, and riders who wanted a manual transmission thought the whole thing was unnecessary. Poor Honda-matic, ahead of its time, or just solving a problem nobody had. You decide. Fact number 6, it killed Kawasaki's secret project. Here's a fun one. When the CB750 got unveiled in Las Vegas, Kawasaki had people at that meeting, executives, engineers, all taking notes. And apparently when they saw what Honda had built, someone made a phone call back to Japan that basically said stop everything, because Kawasaki had been secretly developing their own 4-cylinder 750 on it for a while. But when they saw the CB750, they realized their bike wasn't good enough, so they scrapped the entire project. Then they went back to the drawing board and came back with the Z1, which was bigger at 903cc and more powerful. That bike became a legend in its own right. But think about that decision. You've spent months, maybe years, developing a motorcycle. You're getting close to release, and then a competitor shows up with something so good that you just throw your whole project in the trash. 7. That's the not just competition. Soichiro Honda, the actual founder of Honda Motor Company, very rarely left the factory. He was a hands-on guy, liked to be where the work was happening. But for that January 1969 Las Vegas dealer meeting, he got on a plane and showed up personally. That's how important this bike was. The founder of the company flew to Vegas to be there for the unveiling, and according to people who were there, he was genuinely excited, not doing the corporate handshake thing where you smile and nod. He was proud of what his team had built. There's even a story that before the official announcement, when Bob Hansen, who was a Honda dealer, asked him about the secret motor they were developing, Soichiro smiled and said they were working on the king of motorcycles, not a good motorcycle or an impressive motorcycle. The king and the best. And he was right. Fact number 8, American dealers designed it. So why did Honda build the CB750 in the first place? The answer is actually kind of funny. An engineer named Yoshiro Harada, same guy who led the development team, went to America in 1967 to promote the CB450, Honda's big bike at the time. And American dealers basically told him, this is cute, but Americans want displacement. We want torque. We want power. Harada also spent time riding on American highways, and he had this realization that America is just big. Roads go on forever. You need a bike that can handle that. So he went back to Japan and pitched the idea of a bigger, more powerful 4-cylinder, something built specifically for American riders and American roads. Honda approved it, and the CB750 was born. So in a weird way, this Japanese bike that defined the superbike category was designed because American dealers complained that Honda's bikes were too small. The CB750 exists because Americans wanted more. Fact number 9, 5 bikes per day. When production started at Honda's Saitama factory, they could only build about 5 bikes per day. The line was so inefficient at first that they were basically hand building these things. 5 bikes trickling out the door every day while Honda had thousands of back orders piling up. Eventually, they sorted out the production issues and ramped units per day. But those early months must have been stressful. Imagine being a dealer who just placed an order for 50 bikes. Knowing that Honda's pumping out 5 per day, you'd be waiting months. But that's the thing with new products. Even when you've got the design figured out, manufacturing at scale is a whole different challenge. Honda learned that lesson the hard way with the CB750. Fact number 10, engine case spotting guide. Here's one for the nerds. If you're trying to figure out if a CB750 is a rare early sandcast model, look at the clutch cover. Sandcast engines have 10 screws on the clutch cover. Die-cast engines have 11. Also, the engine cases on sandcast models have a rougher finish, less polished. You can see the texture difference if you know what to look for. These little details matter because sandcast CB750s are worth serious money. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars for a clean example, so collectors obsess over this stuff. It's wild that one extra screw and a slightly smoother finish can add that much value to a bike. But that's collectibles for you. Fact number 11. Undersquare design. The CB750 used what's called an undersquare engine design. That means the stroke is longer than the bore diameter. Specifically, the bore was 61mm and the stroke was 63mm. Now, Honda usually preferred oversquare engines, where the bore is bigger than the stroke. Oversquare engines can rev higher and make more horsepower, but for the CB750, they went undersquare. Why? Width. A transverse inline-4 engine is already wide. If they'd used a bigger bore, the engine would have been even wider. So they stretched the stroke instead to hit the displacement they wanted while keeping the engine as narrow as possible. It was a compromise. Not the best for peak horsepower, but better for packaging and making the bike easier to ride. Sometimes engineering isn't about finding the perfect solution. It's about finding the solution that works best for the real world. Fact number 12. Police training bikes in Japan. The CB750 became the go-to bike for riding schools. If you wanted to get your large motorcycle license in Japan, you were probably learning on a CB750. Riding schools loved them because the engine was smooth, the chassis was stable, and they were reliable. Which makes sense. The CB750 was designed to be user-friendly. Electric start, smooth power delivery, predictable handling, but it's still funny to think about. This bike that was marketed as a superbike, this king of motorcycles, ended up teaching thousands of nervous beginners how to ride. That's actually a compliment to the design. A truly good motorcycle should be accessible to new riders while still being exciting for experienced ones. The CB750 managed both. Fact number 13, the shaft drive that never was. Honda originally planned to use shaft drive on the CB750. Shaft drive is smoother, requires less maintenance, and looks cleaner. It makes sense for a premium motorcycle. But at some point during development, they decided to stick with chain drive instead. Why? Money. Shaft drive costs more to manufacture. And Honda was already worried about whether the CB750 would sell, remember? So they cut costs where they could. Chain drive works fine. It's not as maintenance-free as shaft drive, but it's reliable and it's cheaper, so they went with it. Sometimes the business side of things overrules the engineering side. That's just reality. Fact number 14, 100 pages of updates. Here's the uncomfortable truth about the CB750. The first year models had problems. How bad? Honda released over 100 pages of technical bulletins and updates in the first year of production. Some of the issues were minor, some were legitimately serious. There was even a group called the 4 Owners Club that got so fed up with the problems that they wrote letters to Congress and to Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California at the time. People were mad. They'd bought this expensive new superbike and things kept breaking. To Honda's credit, they addressed the issues. They released fixes. They made improvements. And by the second year, most of the problems were sorted out. But that first year was rough. And it's a reminder that even legendary motorcycles can have growing pains. The CB750 changed the industry despite those early problems. That says something about how good the core design was. Fact number 15, the king of motorcycles. Let's bring it back to where we started, the CB750 as the king of motorcycles. When Soichiro Honda used that phrase, it wasn't just marketing hype, he meant it. This bike had everything. 4 cylinders when most bikes had 1 or 2. A front disc brake when most bikes still had drums. Electric start when most bikes needed a kick. It was smooth, fast, reliable, and reasonably priced. Competitors couldn't match it, not right away. It took years for other manufacturers to catch up. The CB750 invented the modern superbike category. Everything that came after it, the Z1, the GS1000, the CBX, all of it was a response to what Honda did with this bike. That's why collectors obsess over early models. That's why people still ride them today. That's why we're still talking about a bike from 1969. It wasn't just a good motorcycle, it was a revolution. So there you go. 15 weird facts about the Honda CB750. Some of these I knew before, but honestly, doing the research for this video taught me a ton. The instant price hike, the Nevada torture test, Kawasaki killing their own project. There's so much interesting stuff that doesn't get talked about. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel. And if you want more deep dives on classic bikes, subscribe because I've got more of these coming. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.